that for newcomers to represent this plan so folks are familiar with what the revenues are, what the proposed expenditures of the EIFD will be, and of course, address questions and consider public comment. The action today is, again, to hear those comments, but also to take action to modify or reject the plan, or to continue into additional public hearings to further vet this plan with members of the community. The underlying mechanism in the EIFD is something called Tax Increment Financing, TIF. This is a similar mechanism to what was employed by the former redevelopment agencies. The idea is you set a baseline of assessed value at the time of district formation, and as value grows over time from new development or from increased assessment from improvements of underutilized properties or rehabilitation, the idea is that entities that receive a portion of the property tax, such as the city of Fresno, the county of Fresno, can set aside some portion of those future property tax dollars, like a retirement account, to prioritize infrastructure. This is in no way a new tax. No way a new tax. Residents, business owners, property owners, this is not a new tax. This is the city voluntarily setting aside a portion of dollars to keep those dollars local for infrastructure and affordable housing. As I go forward, these are the contents of the actual infrastructure financing plan, that full document. This is a very high-level summary of that document. But that document includes a description of the district in terms of geography and assessed value. Letter B, what are the proposed potential future development that can happen within the boundary of the district, as well as the proposed uses of the dollars. What sorts of infrastructure will be paid for with EIFD dollars. There's a portion that talks about why this is more of a community-wide significance. This is not about any specific project or projects in the city. This is about a community and even regional benefit. Section D, as in David, of the plan goes into the nuts and bolts of the financing, revenue numbers, proposed uses of the dollars. Item E goes into the overarching goals of the district, and then there are a series of very detailed appendices pursuant to the statute, a map and legal description, the financial analysis detail, and greater detail on the Blackstone Corridor Smart Mobility Plan and other details. The proposed boundary is focused under the Southern Blackstone Bus Rapid Transit Corridor, as well as the downtown planning area of the city, shown here on page 6, also in the infrastructure financing plan. In terms of numbers, it's a little over 4,000 acres, a little less than 6% of the whole city in terms of acreage. 2.89 billion in existing assessed value. It's a little under 8% of the city total. Within this same area, we always compare what is potential new development value compared to existing value. That is a measure of the potential value that can be captured with a district like this. And that potential new value, based on research within the city's own general plan, is over $2 billion in new development value within the general plan time horizon by 2035, 2040 or so. So significant value that can be captured by a district like this. It's a big part of the purpose of pursuing tax increment financing. In terms of how that $2 billion of new value, potential value, breaks out in terms of land use, a lot of residential, both rental and for sale product, commercial product, as well as hotel product, again, within the boundaries of the district. So this is how that total new value, potentially, how it breaks down by land use. Again, all of this is in greater detail in the infrastructure financing plan. Proposed uses of the dollars. Initial focus is on smart mobility plan improvements, characterized by multimodal safety and accessibility improvements, roadway and bus improvements, streetscape, urban greening, lighting, gateway and wayfinding. And not all of the present value dollars are accounted for specifically within the mobility plan, because what normally happens within this district is more becomes known as time goes on. This is a 50-year district, and it is the goal to allow some capacity for the Public Financing Authority through the process laid out in the law to get specific with additional improvements that may become desired elsewhere within downtown, for example. And the law is very specific about what can be funded, but generally, again, we're talking about infrastructure and affordable housing, reviewing the local specific plans within these EIFD boundary. There are a variety of water, sewer, other types of utility enhancements, parks and open space improvements, even remediation and affordable housing projects, which are eligible for expenditure, but any further expenditure of funds would need to be vetted by this body, the Public Finance Authority, and incorporated into the infrastructure financing plan. Return on investment for the city. This is about implementing essential infrastructure and public improvements within census tracts that are designated by the state essentially as disadvantaged community census tract areas. The goals are quality of life improvement, environmental sustainability, significant housing improvements. It's catalyzing housing through infrastructure is one way I may characterize it. Members of the PFA may have additional comments to add. This is a way that our firm Cosmont would characterize it. Housing and transit supportive infrastructure. In terms of other economic development benefits, we quantify job creation, both from construction and on an ongoing permanent basis in the thousands. And very importantly, from a fiscal basis, from a general fund solvency basis, this is a positive return on investment for the city of Fresno on the order of $17 million on a present value basis. We would not recommend for any of our city or county clients to consider a mechanism like this unless it were a positive fiscal investment of dollars, especially in constrained financial times. I won't go into too much on page 11. The most important factor is to consider we're not talking about all of the future property tax dollars that the city receives within this boundary. We are, what's currently in the plan is a 30% dedication of those future dollars. So no portion at all of existing revenues to the city, but a proposed 30% of future dollars, leaving the remaining 70% to flow to the city general fund. It's what we would characterize as a pretty conservative approach with the goal of carving out really the dollars that are necessary for the targeted improvements, but allowing the majority of funds to continue to the general fund. The goal is larger than just the tax increment itself. The way more than 35 communities across the state are pursuing these districts. The goal is not just to utilize the tax increment, it's to attract other complementary funding. There has already been precedent in the state for cities and counties to partner, even when cities form these districts alone, as the city of Fresno is pursuing currently. The door is completely open for other taxing entities, such as the County of Fresno, to join in subsequent years, as has happened elsewhere within California. Additionally, these districts act truly as a magnet for a grant funding. What the grant providers at the state level, such as Housing and Community Development, Strategic Growth Council, Department of Water Resources, they view these districts not only as matches of local funding as part of grant applications, but additional demonstration as a, not just a general fund budget line item, but a dedicated special purpose entity that is only authorized to do two things: infrastructure and affordable housing. And grant applications through these entities receive a higher priority for those grant funds due to that special purpose nature. A large part of this is not only the EIFD itself, but to attract additional complementary funding. As far as today's action and next steps, the goal, again, as in previous meetings, is to answer questions and address comments from the public. Pursuant to the law, this is an opportunity to take, for the Public Financing Authority Board, to take action to modify this plan or reject the plan, or otherwise continue in the public hearing process. The next goals beyond today, next steps, would be separate from the PFA, the City Council of the City of Fresno would separately have to consider and approve this infrastructure financing plan prior to formation. This would be in September. And an additional meeting of this body, tentatively scheduled for September 30th. All of these meetings, by the way, would of course be duly noticed in newspaper and mailing format and on the EIFD website, as have all of these meetings been. But an additional meeting by this body would be required, tentatively scheduled for September 30th, to formally establish this district and approve the infrastructure financing plan. Beyond that, we would say there's still work to do. Even after district formation, again, it would be a suggestion from at least Kazan as a technical advisor to then utilize this district to pursue complementary funding sources, such as the grants mentioned earlier, as well as to pursue and promote development opportunity sites within the opportunity zone census tracts. So this boundary, in addition to the disadvantaged community, this census tract designation also contains opportunity zone census tract designations, which present significant financial benefit to private sector investments due to capital gains tax treatment. So the idea, as is with many of these districts, is to layer these tools, EIFD, opportunity zone, grants, in order to truly catalyze development. And that is also the goal here. And one last mention, again, all EIFD documents are available at the dedicated EIFD website, fresno.gov/EIFD. And that concludes my presentation, but would of course be happy to continue to address questions and comments. Thank you, council member and members of the board.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. I appreciate the very thorough presentation. Again, to recap just some of the primary points about the Fresno EIFD, again, for some of the newcomers to our meetings. This is, in a nutshell, a committed reinvestment. There are no new taxes at all on any of these properties. What we're doing is we're taking a portion of the existing taxes that are already being paid, and instead of those monies going to the general fund of the city, we're reinvesting it into the infrastructure of these boundaries. So, we're talking about a committed reinvestment to the inner core of our city, but ultimately the whole city, will benefit from this redevelopment and revitalization because of the infrastructure investment. This is a discussion item. I know Joe gave out the presentation. Is there any questions, comments, or discussion from any of my colleagues before we proceed to the public hearing portion? Okay. All right.
No, I think we're good.
Okay. Well, let's move into let's go ahead and move into the public hearing portion. Let me see here. So this is an opportunity for members of the public to provide their input and comments on the draft infrastructure financing plan, which you heard a little bit about in the presentation, but is also available on fresno.gov/EIFD. This was provided on all of the previous three previous public notices that have gone out to all the properties within the boundaries. And actually, Clerk, would you mind dropping I'm not sure if you have done it yet, but dropping the fresno.gov/EIFD link into the chat box, please.
Okay.
But I'll now open up the public hearing. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak who wants to speak. If you'd like to speak, there is a raise hand button if you're on Zoom. If you called in on a telephone and you'd like to speak, you would raise your hand by pressing *9. So either pressing the raise hand button on Zoom or pressing *9 on your telephone. And I'll go ahead and call on folks in the order that we get folks raising their hand. So we have one person up for now. So Janice, you are first. You have 3 minutes.
Thank
you so much. First of all, I appreciate what you're doing. I apologize because I haven't read over all of the background information, but I do know that there are parking problems and issues in certain parts of downtown at the moment, and I'm hoping that these things will be taken into consideration going forward.
Thank you, Janice. Will that conclude your comments?
That's it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. We have our next speaker, Mr. Mesa. Mr. Mesa.
Hello, guys. Can you
Hello.
guys hear me? Okay. Well, everything sounds really good. I just have, it sounds wonderful, the way that we can improve all the infrastructure and the downtown and also the Blackstone Avenue. My concern, I agree with that. It would be really good for everything, especially for the water, if it's going to be help also from the state level. But because the water quality is really bad in the downtown area, but I don't know how you guys are going to address all these homeless and safety issues that we have in the downtown area, because it sounds really good. It's going to be improvements, but honestly, who wants to live over there that is so insecure? That's my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mesa. So I'm not seeing any other hands at the moment. Again, for folks who do want to speak during this public hearing, you would press the raise hand button on Zoom, or if you're on a telephone, you would press *9, at which point that would raise your hand and I could call on you. Give folks just a couple more seconds. Okay, here we go. So we have a phone number. It is the 493 phone number. You have 3 minutes. And if you could press *6 to unmute the 493 phone number.
Yes, 493-9848. I had asked on your first initial meeting, the street designations, because I live in West Fresno, and yet I have gotten 4 announcements, which gives me the impression that the district must include areas on the southwest side of the railroad. Is that true?
If you have received the notice, then your property is within the boundaries. Let me go ahead and I can pull up the map on the city website, and that way folks can just take a look here if you haven't had a chance to take a look.
I need it to be read to me because I'm not that savvy on utilizing my phone to do this. I had asked this question when you first had your meeting, and I don't know why we can't get street designations as a part of the boundary that is included. See, I'm asking the same question I asked 4 months ago.
I think, Nelson, if we get her address, we could probably tell her, but it seems like, ma'am, if you did receive the notice, as he mentioned, your home would likely be included as part of the boundary. The fact is that it's not a perfect square boundary, so I don't know how difficult it would be to acquire all the streets that are at the boundary. I'm not sure. Can Joe speak to that? Because he's the one that put the map together.
Yeah, so here's the map, just for folks to see what the boundaries are. And Joe, yeah, if you could speak to that.
I think an address check would be probably the best way to do it. I just wanted to add one point of clarification, that folks who received the notice were either residents within the boundary or owners of property within the boundary. So even if someone lived outside of this boundary, but owned property within the boundary, they would also have received the notice. But coming back to the first part of the question, I think the easiest way would be if you are comfortable sharing your address, we can confirm directly for you.
Or she can contact me via phone tomorrow and I can get her information. I would hate for her to do that over the internet like that.
Okay, yeah, that would be good.
Well, because it appears that West Fresno, at least to Kearney Boulevard, is being included. Is that right?
I tell you what, if you can, what's your name?
The name is Williams, DorYthea.
Okay. And let me give you a phone number. If you can call me tomorrow, I can get that information for you.
The name is what?
My name is Yvonne. If you can call me at 621-7665, that's my direct number, and I can get your information.
7665?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And you are Yvonne whom?
Yvonne Spence.
How do you spell it? The last name.
Paul, yeah, S-P as in Paul, E-N, C as in Charlie, E.
Oh, Spence.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. All right.
Okay.
Yes, and my staff member from my city council office is also going to go ahead and give you a call this afternoon as well to speak offline.
All right.
Some of those questions they'll be calling you. I can see your phone number here on the screen, so they'll just be calling that same.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, Madam Clerk, maybe you could also figure out how you guys get her a copy of the map.
Okay.
That way she gets a physical copy, but just so the public does know, for those that don't have.
See, I don't have the stat. I don't have a computer, and I don't have the skills to bring it downloaded on my phone. So if you have a choice of either giving me that information verbally now or mailing me a copy, because if you can see my phone number, you ought to be able to get my house number too.
Ms. Williams, I think the easiest way would be to mail you a map. That way you have a clear picture of what the what areas of the city of Fresno, but just for the purpose of those folks like you that don't have the ability to access a computer right now and can see the boundary map that was posted. It does include parts of Southwest Fresno. That's why Council President Arias is also sitting on this committee, and he represents that area. So downtown and parts of Southwest Fresno are included.
All right. All right. You have my address then?
No, but my staff.
Get that later.
Staff will give you a call this afternoon. And
all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So next up we have Mr. Alfonso.
Yes, I have a question. I have a property on South Tillman by White Bridge Road by the airport. And it's a rental property. I've been receiving from several real estate concerns about the sale of that property. Is there some new development or something going out there or something that, because I live out of state and I don't know what's going on there. I went to the one meeting several years ago, but is there anything that's going on there, development and so forth, that I should know about?
So with respect to this meeting and this issue, I mean, we are simply discussing the formation of the district here. We're not proposing any specific project here. Councilmember Arias, perhaps you could speak to if there is any or maybe offline, speak to if there is a development out there?
Yeah, let's do this. Let's go. Go ahead. I'm going to type in my number on the chat box and also repeat it. You guys can call me directly if you have any questions related to the portion of our district and West Fresno specifically, because there's way too many projects to name them at this point, and I'll be happy to walk you through those questions.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to chime in. I think the reason that folks are asking this, they're getting notified that this is happening. And for those that chimed in late, because I know that there's another gentleman, Raul Carrillo, who has a business in downtown Fresno. They're trying to figure out what will happen as a result of the creation of this body. So maybe Joe, if you can again summarize, just for purposes of folks that joined a little bit late, just basically what the EIFD is very quickly, and then what are some of the benefits that can come as a result. But we are not, as mentioned, we're not voting on any specific projects at the current moment.
Thank you.
That's correct.
The Tachi Battles presents a 200K Crops of Cash giveaway.
This district is a financing mechanism. So this district itself is in no way proposing development of any kind. This district is a financing mechanism. The type of public improvements that this district is authorized to fund, again, is limited to infrastructure and affordable housing. The specific activities to be funded by this district in the future are required to be outlined in this document called an Infrastructure Financing Plan. That is the document that is available on the EIFD website at fresno.gov/EIFD. And to cover it at a high level, again, those improvements that we are talking about that will be funded by the EIFD are initially targeted as the Smart Mobility Plan, transit supportive infrastructure improvements. So again, along the lines of safety, accessibility, roadway and bus improvements, streetscape, urban greening, lighting, gateway, and wayfinding. Future meetings, likely in subsequent years of this body, the Public Financing Authority, may detail additional types of improvements to be considered. And again, those would have to be eligible pursuant to the law. So things that generally tend to be included are things like water, sewer, utility enhancements, parks, remediation of contaminated properties, and affordable housing. So those are the types of improvements we're talking about, not private development itself. This type of district is not authorized to fund private development. This is about infrastructure.
Joe,
hopefully that is helpful.
Yeah, I have a follow-up to that, because I think, when you guys are the experts, but we're dealing with, community folks that are business owners in the community that may not understand all of the things about infrastructure and so forth. So can you, just in layman's terms, describe what would be some of the benefits that could result for folks that own property or folks that own businesses in these areas? Because we know that majority of these areas have been underserved, lack a lot of the infrastructure, parks and so forth. But what can you speak to, because I'm sure you've worked on several of these, like you said, in the last 10 years, what have businesses in these types of districts seen as a result of the creation?
Of course. Thank you, Council Member. The type of results we see are what we'd characterize as catalytic effects. The idea is that areas such as Blackstone may be currently underutilized. And what it often takes to get things to happen in these areas is for people to feel safe, for people to feel like they can actually get there, such as via transportation, and for people to feel comfortable, to set up places that people like to spend time. And so for property owners or business owners, the idea is to create an environment that is more welcoming to consumers, as an example. Things as simple as signage, lighting, improved sidewalks, streetscapes, even things like trees planted along corridors, and things like signage and paths to and from bus stations have historically proven to help folks actually patronize businesses, actually come to businesses and spend money, help folks to actually, developers to actually build new housing, because folks can actually then live in that area and get to and from work via bus rapid transit service, as an example. So this is meant as a means of catalyzing business and private development.
All right, thank you, Joe. We're going to continue to proceed with public comment. We have a hand raised. Mr. It's not a name, but Jay Seraccio. You are now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, this is Jimmy Tracchio with the Downtown Fresno Partnership. I've been reading everything on this and stuff, and I just want to clarify, since we still have a lot of property owners calling us asking, this is not a new tax on them, correct? This is just everything taken after the cap that is in the normal increase in property value, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Anything I'm missing on that, or does that sum it up well?
That is a solid summary. There are no new taxes. There's nothing being imposed on any properties within this district. This is a net positive. We're reinvesting your existing tax dollars back into the infrastructure and within the boundaries of the district.
Okay, we will keep working to reassure people. Thank you.
Appreciate that. I apologize for mispronouncing the name. So again, right now I'm not seeing any folks with their hands raised. But if you would like to raise your hand and speak, you would press *9 on your telephone or press the raise hand button. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. If you missed this opportunity to speak, there will be another public comment portion, which we are going to move into right now. So at this point, we're moving into item F. Close the public hearing on item E, and we're moving into item F, which is public comment. So if there's someone I happen to miss, now will be the opportunity for the public to go ahead and give general comments. Again, you press raise hand or press *9 to speak. Okay, we have Janice.
I'm not clear as to what was the difference between the public hearing and this juncture, but I figured since we're still on, I'd like to reiterate what the other person said about the homelessness situation. I know sometimes I worry about it for a lot of different reasons, but I'm not sure how the infrastructure will work to help with that situation. I'm unclear about that.
So you know, I want to reemphasize something.
If I may try to explain it in layman's terms to the general public, to Jan's question around homelessness and how that would be addressed through a reinvestment district like this. So one of the eligible expenditures of the money that we would reinvest would be for public housing. So some of these funds could be used for, you know, establishing homeless shelters, which allows us to take people off the streets and outside the residential neighborhoods and freeways into actual shelters. So it's just one of the ways that we could help with that. Other ways is making some additional improvements in the infrastructure. When we say infrastructure, that's our fancy technical word of describing, you know, repaving the street that's crumbling in front of your house, replacing the light poles that have been out for a few years, fixing a sidewalk that's broken, has been, you know, lifted because of the trees are outgrowing. It's the stuff that neighbors complain to us all day, and that just on sidewalks, to give an example, our current backlog of sidewalk improvements in the city of Fresno is $1 billion, as in B, in billion. So every year we might be able to make about $1 million of sidewalk improvements. this would allow us to have additional revenue and focus that money in that specific area outlined within the boundaries. So it would just mean another pot of money for fixing sidewalks, streets, lighting, maybe building more affordable housing that would help the homeless or those who are struggling with the increasing cost of rents and mortgages. It's all the things that businesses ask us to do when they're trying to develop in our area. For example, I have one housing project right now where the developer doesn't need any money to build the facility, but the pipes underneath the ground are 100 years old and they're not big enough to deal with the additional capacity that an apartment complex would create. So it's those kind of simple things that are boring and mostly underground, but extremely expensive to do, and we don't have enough money for.
I guess, if I may, I guess it gets down to mental health issues more so than, I guess, when we're connecting like infrastructure. I understand infrastructure, but I'm not sure how we're going to be able to still deal with mental health issues that seem to permeate much of the homeless community. That's the concern, I guess. And if we're trying to
And
safe.
Jen, you're absolutely right. And mental health is a part of the equation that the County of Fresno is responsible for funding. What you'll see is the cities typically fund the actual facility, building the facility, acquiring the facility, and then we rely on the county to come in with mental health programs to actually operate the facility. So this would allow us to have money to build facilities, but of course the county is a primary provider of mental health facilities and services to the homeless. So they would have to step forward with the programming funds.
Okay. So at this point, I'm not seeing any other hands raised. I will go one last call for public comment. To distinguish for the last speaker, the public hearing was specifically to address concerns on the infrastructure financing plan. Public comment can also be used for that purpose, but also anything more general regarding the EIFD. So we are roughly just really a kind of a logistical difference, but last call for folks to raise their hand on Zoom or press *9 on their telephone to speak. Okay, so going to close public comment. We're going to move on to the next part of the agenda. That is going to be item G, the action item. So take action to modify or reject the infrastructure financing plan. So again, this is our the third meeting we've discussed this and noticed and provided the information to property owners in the district. Hopefully everyone has had a chance over the last several months to examine the infrastructure financing plan. So I'll go ahead and open it up to for a discussion or for a motion from the board here. I would make a motion to approve the IFP infrastructure financing plan that is before us today.
Councilmember, just a clarification, today's hearing does not allow for that motion to be made. That motion would be made at the third hearing after the city council has voted on the infrastructure financing plan. However, today you all can modify or reject the plan. If you do neither of those, the city council is free to, or if you modify it, the city council is free to to pass a resolution, and then it'll come back, and then you will pass that approving resolution.
I see. Okay, so the there is potential action to be taken today, but is not required at this point.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. Well, I open the floor to the discussion from my colleagues based on the current IFP, current version of it.
I have a question to our city attorney. When it comes to modifications, is it related to the actual boundaries? Is it related to, the amount of money that we would be collecting? I'm just curious, what are the parameters?
So I believe it's anything in the plan that the public has commented on or that you believe should be modified. So yeah, it's anything that's in the plan.
And then just a question, also another follow-up question. So we've been having discussions about annexing new land, and we know that there's opportunities in a variety of areas, in particular kind of west of the 99. I know that this district includes a little portion of the Southwest. What happens if there's neighborhoods that abut the current boundary line? Will those have to go through a process to be included if they want to be included at a later time?
City Attorney, I can address that, Raj. So pretty much the only restriction on revisions that can be made over time is that we cannot grow the boundary in future years. We are restricted to stay within this boundary over time. Any additional areas of the city that might consider a tool like this would technically need to form brand new districts. The governing body could be the same as this body, but it would technically be a different district as far as the State Board of Equalization and the County Auditor Controller is concerned, related to how to divide taxes. So there's really no technically speaking, there's no annexation possible. It would have to be a brand new district. And as far as the revisions that can be made in this process, I completely agree with the City Attorney's Office. The types of things we can change now, or everything in the plan as it pertains to the boundary, we can shrink the boundary, but we cannot grow the boundary for the remainder of these public hearings. And the reason being, based on our reading, is because folks outside of the boundary would not have had the opportunity to receive all of the notices that have been mailed out throughout this process. And they wouldn't have had fair chance to weigh in through this accountability and transparency process. So I'd say pretty much anything is on the table revision-wise, except for growing the boundary.
Perfect, thank you. That clarifies my questions.
As I noted in my motion attempt, I read through the IFP. I'm comfortable with the current existing boundaries, comfortable with the spending plan, as well as the contribution level, which is at 30% right now. So again, to clarify for the public, when we're talking about the percentage, we're talking about as property values are increasing over the years and more property taxes are being paid, existing property taxes, 30% would be set aside for this district to fund infrastructure within the boundaries. So looking at those primary components, those are probably the components that we'd like to consider and discuss today.
I'm comfortable with that. Another question that I have, because I know that the financing scenario, it included 3 bullet points, the last one being the county not contributing at this time. If the county miraculously decides to contribute, does that ever happen in other EIFDs? And are those separate negotiations that happen, or is it part of the hearing? I'm just wondering, what's the process for that?
We do have the ability to add the county on at a later time. So just because we're not capturing a portion of the county now does not preclude us from doing that later on. And then Joe, if you could answer the other portion of that question.
Yes, of course. Thank you. So yes, it has happened. There are 2 others so far, and 2 others that will likely be formed by the end of this calendar year, that involve city and counties actually partnering. And so far, one of those in Los Angeles County was one where the city formed alone in 1 year in 2017, and the County of Los Angeles just joined this year in 2020. So it has happened, and it is continuing to happen. As far as the process goes, it would essentially be treated as a revision to the plan. And what that entails is the County Board of Supervisors would separately and independently have to approve any contribution of county dollars. This governing body, this Public Financing Authority Board, would also have to change to include supervisor participation. So it may grow, it may just change the composition. It has to stay at least 5 members. there have to be at least two members of the public serving, but also that at least one county supervisor would need to be added to allow for their own say in the governance. So this body would have to meet and go through a series of hearings again to essentially add them into the infrastructure financing plan as a additional revenue. And the county may also have their own thoughts on what the dollars should be spent on. And so the funding plan would potentially change, but that would be treated as a separate process, but it would be much like this process in terms of the number of hearings, and you would basically add separate county board of supervisor hearings to consider their own participation. It would be an amendment to the plan.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
Yeah, so I wholeheartedly agree, Councilmember Soria, that would be that should be a goal of this body, is to eventually in the future bring the county's contribution into the fold. That would significantly amplify the numbers that we're looking at now. So just with this 30% contribution that we're looking at, I believe the projections are that in raw dollars over 50 years, that would bring in $314 million in EIFD funding to invest in infrastructure. What that translates to in present value over 50 years is $126 million. So when you're measuring it just in the sheer amount that's going to come in, $314 million, and then obviously you discount it for present value. But I'm comfortable with that contribution level, and again, open to hearing from the rest of the members.
Yeah, so I'm also comfortable with that proposal for 30% of future tax increments, but I was just curious, theoretically, how high could that percentage go just from a legal standpoint?
I mean, you can't go beyond 100. So I mean, 100% would be the maximum. The reasoning behind 30%, Joe, maybe you can chime in on this, but we want to ensure that there is no net impact, negative net impacts to the general fund. Although, I mean, I would say you can make an argument that if we went a little higher into 33 or 35%, sort of from an equity perspective, it wouldn't be the worst thing if the general fund did subsidize this district just a little bit each year. So, you know, that's a conversation we could have as far as increasing it above 30. But Joe, please correct me if I'm wrong, but at 30%, what is the impact to the general funds?
Exactly right. So I agree with all of the comments. 100 is the max. Current financial projections, and it's in the plan, and pulling it up. But what that currently means is a net positive impact to the city general fund in present value dollars of $17 million over the district lifetime. That's present value dollars. In total dollars, it's about $24 million. Net positive impact on the general fund. Increasing it slightly, it will probably still be positive. I think when we're in the range of 50% or more contribution for the city of Fresno, I think that's when we start to approach neutral and potentially negative. But that's where we currently are. 30% is about 17 million positive to the general fund.
Joe, could you tell us what the 33 and 35 look like? Is that something you have on hand?
1 second, please.
In terms of general fund impact, I mean, I think that's sort of what this conversation is circulating around.
Okay. So currently 30%, 17 million positive for the general fund. An increase to 33%. That $17 million positive number is $10 million positive. If we increase to 35% contribution, the net impact on the city general fund on a present value basis is 5 million.
5 million as in it's subsidizing by 5 million, or it's gaining 5 million?
Positive, it's still positive by 5 million. So to summarize, 30% contribution is what it currently says in the IFP. That is a $17 million positive. If it's increased to 33%, that positive is still positive, but it goes from 17 to 10 million. And at a 35% contribution, that positive to the general fund is 5 million, down from 17, but it's still positive.
So it looks like we have the ability to increase marginally, and still kind of uphold our commitment to the general fund. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, it's still positive. Absolutely.
Thoughts from EFA members?
The only thing or question that I have is, how do you make sure that future council members or future councils don't utilize this district to essentially supplant, right? Because what is intended to do here is to augment the investments back into those neighborhoods. How do you make sure is, when we created the district, did we say that, you know, the current levels of investment have to persist? And how do you even track that in the general fund, you know? So those are the only kind of things that I'm thinking about as I recall kind of on an annual basis the types of investments that we do and how we allocate budget resources and so forth. So how is that measured?
So the infrastructure financing plan is the document that has to govern, you know, the amount and what has to be spent money on. It is possible that this body, if it changes as sort of council representation changes in future years, this body can change the infrastructure financing plan, can amend through, you know, the same series of hearings, the infrastructure financing plan in terms of what the dollars are spent, or even the revenue contribution levels, or even terminate the district entirely. The only thing that really ever gets set in stone is once any agreements are entered into or bonds are issued. At that point, much like outstanding debt of the former redevelopment agency, those obligations have to be honored. That would be the sort of untouchable aspect, whatever is, you know, documented with some sort of agreement or a debt issuance, then those dollars are sort of set in stone. But other than that, it can be changed over time, and that's through the amendment process to the infrastructure financing plan.
Yeah, and Councilmember Soria, to take your question more head on, there technically, I don't think there is a mechanism to prevent future councils, future members of the PFA from supplanting and crowding out. I think that's a decision that's going to be made at every summer when the city of Fresno is conducting its budget. I would hope that's not the case, but I don't think there's any sort of promises that anyone can make as to what future council members will do.
At minimum, the district protects the increment, which I guess is the good thing, but there's no guarantees that it won't become supplanted. That's the only thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm supportive of the augmentation of investments to this area, so that's why I was asking.
No, that's a valid concern for all of us, and I think all of us are on this PFA because we believe in the boundaries of this area and the potential for our city. And so it's up. Good thing is you and I sit on the city council, right? And at this moment, and
at least for 2 more years.
And I'm sure that won't happen. So taking a look at the numbers, I mean, I had said I was comfortable with 30, but Joe's projections have indicated that we could increase a little bit without harm to the general fund. How are folks feeling about 33? So at 33% contribution, Joe, I believe you indicated that there's still going to be a $10 million present value fiscal surplus for the general fund. Is that correct? Over 50 years?
Correct. 10 million, 50 years on a present value basis.
Okay. So taking it from 30 to 33, and I believe those projections, that would result in 345 million over 50 years. And if you translate that into present value over 50 years, that's 134 million. So, increasing it from 30 to 33 does make a difference.
Well, let's do it.
So move.
Seconded. Clerk, we're going to go ahead and take a roll call vote on increasing the contribution level from 30 to 33. Yes, please go ahead and do the roll call. Conduct the roll call, please.
Okay, let me make sure I have the motion maker in the second. Who was the motion maker?
I did.
Okay, and the second?
I was.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, Board Member Soria?
Yes.
Board Member Bagna?
Aye.
Board Member Fuentes?
Yes.
Vice Chair Arias?
Yes.
Okay, and Chair Esparza?
Aye.
Okay.
All right, so it looks like we have a unanimous vote on increasing the contribution level just a bit, while still having a positive impact to the general fund over the long term. Are there any other portions of the infrastructure financing plan that members would like to discuss or debate or potentially modify? Fantastic. I think that's going to conclude item G, our action item. I think we only took one action to modify, again, increase the contribution level from 30 to 33. Any last comments from members of this body for the good of the order?
Councilmember Esparza, I have plenty, but I'll save mine for the council meeting.
Perfect. Well, I'm thrilled with the action we took today. Just to reiterate the process that was presented in the beginning on the discussion item, the next steps is this IFP, as it has currently been amended, will go to the City Council for approval. Once that happens, then we will conduct the final public hearing, similar to what we're doing here now, and that will solidify the formation of the Fresno EIFD. So with that, we will go ahead and adjourn this meeting. I appreciate everyone who took the time to come out this afternoon. Take care, and we will see you at the council meeting and the next one. And again, these meetings are always publicly noticed, so we will receive notice prior to this meeting happening again.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.